back in 2019. Other big winners on the night were the Lib Dems and Reform UK. In Scotland, though, the SNP had a disastrous night. I just want to pause and take a look at the numbers because they really are worth taking a look at. It's been an extraordinary night, a redrawing, shall we say, the political map. The Labour Party, of course, a triumphant total for them. They're currently on 409 seats in total. Worth pointing out that they've done this on the lowest vote share for any party to win a majority at an election. So a shallow but broad appeal from the Labour Party. Let's have a look now at how this big election win for Labour unfolded. Jason Farrell has the story of the night.
Reception. We did it!
Today, the country will have a new Prime Minister.
You campaigned for it. People will be waking up to the news, relieved that a weight has been lifted, a burden finally removed from the shoulders of this great nation. And now we can look forward again, walk into the morning, the sunlight of hope, pale at first, but getting stronger through the day, shining once again on a country with the opportunity after 14 years to get its future back.
His slogan was change, and that's coming for him and his family. It's change, too, for a string of Conservative big hitters who've lost their seats. The biggest scalp, former Prime Minister Liz Truss, losing what should be a safe seat in Norfolk South West.
It's not so much that Labour won this election, but rather that the Conservatives have lost it.
The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, and the leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, won't be going back there.
Our renewal as a party and a country will not be achieved by us talking to an ever smaller slice of ourselves, but by being guided by the people of this country.
7 cabinet ministers fell when Blair won in 1997. The Tories had already lost more than that as Rishi Sunak arrived for his result in Richmond.
Shapps, gone. Chalk, gone. Mordaunt, gone. Keegan, gone. Hart, gone. Fraser, gone. Mercer, gone.
This will go down as the biggest electoral miscalculation ever in terms of the timing of when he called this.
Sunak held on to his seat, but conceded defeat to Labour.
The Labour Party has won this general election, and I have called Sir Keir Starmer to congratulate him on his victory. Today, power will change hands in a peaceful and orderly manner, with goodwill on all sides. That is something that should give us all confidence in our country's stability and future. The British people have delivered a sobering verdict tonight. There is much to learn and reflect on, and I take responsibility for the loss.
This wasn't just Labour's night. Reform took large chunks out of the Tory vote. Defector Lee Anderson won in Ashfield. And more than 30 years after he fought his first by-election, Nigel Farage became an MP for the first time on his 8th attempt.
Half of the vote is simply an anti-Conservative vote. This Labour government will be in trouble very, very quickly. We will now be targeting Labour votes. We're coming for Labour, be in no doubt about that.
Other big Tory names fell to the Lib Dems, among them former Brexit Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg, losing North East Somerset, Ed Davey's party having its best night in decades.
What I've loved most hasn't been the paddleboarding or the bungee jumping. It's been speaking to people here in Kingston and Surbiton and across the United Kingdom about the challenges they face and their hopes for the future.
It's been a bruising night for the SNP. Their vote collapsed across Scotland, with Labour mopping them up.
We've had a really difficult and damaging result, and we will have to think long and hard about the implications of the results in Scotland tonight.
Labour had upsets too. The Green Party co-leader Clara Denyer deposing the Shadow Culture Secretary in Bristol Central. Expelled former leader Jeremy Corbyn beat his old party to retain Islington North. And former Shadow Health Secretary Jonathan Ashworth lost Leicester South to a pro-Palestinian independent. The Labour vote has been dented in Muslim areas. Jess Phillips just won in Birmingham Yardley, but was booed by opponents. Since the countdown to the exit poll at 10 p.m. last night, watched in anticipation around the country, what's emerged is roughly what the polls had been predicting, an historic and crushing defeat for the Conservatives.
Since COVID, Partygate, the Johnson, Truss and Sunak administrations, this is the first time the British people have been able to pass judgment on this government, and the verdict is damning.
But voters have not flocked solely to Labour. It's a fragmented picture, and despite a landslide and a large majority, Starmer has many challenges ahead. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, we've got a new face around the table. Joining us is Liz Kendall, former Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. I guess perhaps hoping for that to be made into the Work and Pension Secretary by the end of the day. Let's start off with the extraordinary result. You must be delighted.
I am. I feel so proud of Keir and the whole team. The long, hard graft we put in to change the party and this quite remarkable victory, and that is down to Keir's leadership. I really remember the morning after the 2019 election, which was so grim, the whole election, and I wouldn't have thought we would have done this. And he was just absolutely single-minded in changing the party, Keir, and I think that this victory is a testament to his remarkable grit, determination and leadership.
Without wanting to take away from the scale of the victory.
I don't think we can. I don't think, without wanting to, I don't think we can. It is astonishing. It really is.
I am going to ask the question.
I know you will.
I
will. I know.
And
I know
without
that's
wanting
your
to
job.
take away from the scale of it, at the same time, you know, it is quite extraordinary to see that this is the Labour vote share is the lowest vote share ever to have secured a majority, lower than David Cameron got when he got the coalition in 2010, lower than Jeremy Corbyn got. Is that a problem?
Do you know, our job isn't to pile up votes in seats. It is to get the biggest, strongest majority and mandate that we can. This is actually a testament to the strategy that we followed, to not have all of our activists in already Labour seats, to move them progressively to more and more challenging seats. And I think this is actually, this result shows that we used our votes wisely, we used our activists widely in order to get that strategy.
I absolutely accept that this is a reflection on an extremely well-run campaign and strategy. You talk about...
Laser-focused.
Laser-focused.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, there's going to be difficult times ahead. You will acknowledge that more than anyone. The inheritance is difficult. The more people who vote for you across the country, whether or not they are in safe seats or not, that matters, doesn't it?
I think that what matters is you have to deliver. And the one thing I've learnt, feeling a little bit long in the tooth these days as a politician, is that politics is volatile and you can't take any vote or win for granted. Things can change extraordinarily quickly. And we have seen the country crying out for change. They've backed us to deliver it. But we know, after a brief period where we smile and feel pleased about what we have done, that we've got to get on and deliver, and the pressure to do that. Keir Starmer, I think you heard in his speech, he's under no illusions, but the job and the work has got to start straight away. But we have a plan, we're determined to do it, and you know, I have been all over the country, so have you, I'm sure, speaking to people. There is cynicism about whether change is possible. But I know from great reforming governments of the past who created the NHS, the minimum wage, lifted children out of poverty, devolution in Scotland and Wales. Big changes, social and economic, are possible, but we have to prove and we have to deliver, and that's what we'll intend to do.
You haven't promised changes on that scale, though, have you?
Do you know, again, forgive me for being a child of my political upbringing, I remember in 1997 when we had, on our pledge card, we'd take 100,000 people off NHS waiting lists. We were attacked by the right saying you couldn't do it and the left for saying, you know, it wasn't big enough. But we left office having ended waiting, and Tony Blair was heckled for people having to see their GP within 48 hours. So you can make change, but you have to go step by step.
The changes that we'll see under a Keir Starmer administration are going to be bigger than the ones on the plague chart.
Well,
that's what you're saying.
We've said that. We've said here are the first steps, and here is our vision, a 10-year strategy of change. And people are desperate for it. I see it every week in my surgery. I know the moulding, damp houses. I know the poverty, the people in food banks. I know the poor quality jobs. I know how much has to change. And we are going to roll up these sleeves and get cracking.
We've been keeping a firm eye on the Downing Street door, which we will be doing throughout the day as the transfer of power happens. Are you hoping to be walking up Downing Street later? Have you had any conversations at all?
No, I haven't. And I
no conversations had at all?
No, I would... Anything that Keir asked me to do, front bench, back bench, I'll do. I am... over the moon. You're going to see some incredible new Labour MPs. They're a cracking bunch, and I think this is going to be a really exciting time. OK. One very quick question just to squeeze in while we've got you as well. How concerned are you at the rise of pro-Gaza independent candidates, all people who, of course, are running for George Galloway's Workers' Party? We have seen them eating away, running some Labour MPs, Jess Phillips, Wes Streeting, very close. Do you think that this means Labour should listen, or do you think that actually it's all about sticking to your principles and not worrying about that? I always think you need to listen to voters. I mean, that's why I believe in... I'm a person who's believed in changing the Labour Party, not to say the voters were wrong. And you have to listen, you have to earn that trust, but you have to do that while sticking to your principles about wanting, on this absolutely critical issue, wanting peace, wanting a two-state solution, and wanting to give the people of Palestine and Israel the peace and security they deserve. OK, good to have you on the programme today, Liz Kendall.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.
Right, let's talk to Sam Coates and Adam Bolton, shall we? Sam, you know, Liz, they're just saying that actually, you know what, all it shows is that Labour is winning where it needs to. Don't think about vote share. We've got the majority, we've got the mandate.
Labour have won, and they will delight in the massive majority. But I have to say, whichever way you look at the numbers, this is a loss for incumbents, particularly the Tories, not an advance for the Labour Party. And just going through the statistics is really, really clear. You know, across the whole of the UK, the Tories have dropped 20 percentage points. That's the biggest ever in any election. Labour's barely gone up 1.6. In England, Labour's barely gone up at all. In Scotland, another punishment beating for the incumbents, the SNP down 15 percentage points. That's allowed Labour through. In Wales, where Labour are in power in the Assembly, well, there, Labour are down in these elections, down 4 percentage points. And then if you look at individual seats, again, high-profile names associated with a big incumbent figure are being punished. So in Maidenhead, Theresa May's old seat, that's gone Liberal Democrat. In Uxbridge, Boris Johnson's old seat, that's gone Labour. This is about the public making clear their unhappiness. This has been a vote against something. Do the public know what's going to go in its place? Have they been convinced yet by what's about to pop up?
And yet, Labour have a massive majority in Parliament. And as far as running the country is concerned or implementing an agenda, they look to be in a pretty unassailable position. I mean, the only thing that could stop them would be a massive rebellion in their own ranks. And as we saw with Tony Blair in '97, that doesn't tend to happen very quickly. So while we will see, I think, you know, the Palestinian cause and populist causes to do with immigrants being raised, there's not much danger that Keir Starmer will feel a need to do something that he doesn't want to do. So in that sense, although it's, you know, it's a kind of slightly quizzical verdict from the electorate as far as Labour's concerned, they do now have the opportunity. They have won in the terms. And you know, just adding to what Sam said, 4 of the last 5 Conservative Prime Ministers their constituencies have gone to opposite parties.
So, isn't it?
Cameron's Whitney's gone to Liberal Democrats. Truss is lost in South West Norfolk. Theresa May's Maidenhead gone to Liberal Democrats. Uxbridge and Ruislip gone to Labour. So I think that does really tell you how people are feeling about what they've been put through over the last 14 years or so.
It does feel like a verdict, doesn't it, on 14 years of Conservatives in power. That's an extraordinary statistic with those former Prime Ministers losing their seats. Thank you very much. Well, as Adam was saying, Keir Starmer has won the election. And he's not just won it in style. He's got a huge majority, the kind of majority that you can afford to be pretty radical with. Will he be? We're going to be hearing, of course, first from Rishi Sunak on the steps of Downing Street, and then later, of course, from the incoming Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. We did hear a little bit from him earlier when he spoke at a Labour celebratory event in London's Tate Modern. He was updating his campaign message from change to change begins. Let's hear what he had to say.
We did it! You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now. And it feels good, I have to be honest. 4.5 years of work changing the party. This is what it is for. A changed Labour Party, ready to serve our country, ready to restore Britain to the service of working people. And across our country, people will be waking up to the news, relieved that a weight has been lifted, a burden finally removed from the shoulders of this great nation. And now we can look forward again, walk into the morning, the sunlight of hope, pale at first, but getting stronger through the day, shining once again on a country with the opportunity after 14 years to get its future back. And I want to thank each and every one of you here for campaigning so hard for change. And not just in this campaign either. Also for these 4.5 years changing our party. The Labour movement is always everything's achieved, past and future, down to the efforts of its people. So thank you truly. You have changed our country. But a mandate like this comes with a great responsibility. Our task is nothing less than renewing the ideas that hold this country together. National renewal. Whoever you are, wherever you started in life, if you work hard, if you play by the rules, this country should give you a fair chance to get on. It should always respect your contribution, and we have to restore that. And alongside that, we have to return politics to public service. Show that politics can be a force for good. Make no mistake, that is the great test of politics in this era. The fight for trust is the battle that defines our age. It is why we've campaigned so hard on demonstrating we are fit for public service. Service is the precondition for hope. Respect, the bond that can unite a country. Together, the values of this changed Labour Party are the guiding principle for a new government. Country first, party second. That is the responsibility of this mandate. You know, 14 years ago, we were told that we're all in it together. I say to the British people today, imagine what we can do if that were actually true. So, by all means, enjoy this moment. Nobody can say you haven't waited patiently. Enjoy the feeling of waking up on a morning like this, with the emotion that you do see the country through the same eyes. Hold on to it, because it is what unity is made from. But use it to show to the rest of the country, as we must, that this party has changed, that we will serve them faithfully, govern for every single person in this country. But also, don't forget how we got here. This morning, we can see that the British people have voted to turn the page on 14 years. But don't pretend that there was anything inevitable about that. There's nothing preordained in politics. Election victories don't fall from the sky. They're hard won and hard fought for. And this one could only be won by a changed Labour Party. We have the chance to repair our public services because we changed the party. We have the chance to make work pay because we changed the party. We have the chance to deliver for working people, young people, vulnerable people, the poorest in our society, because we changed the party. Country first, party second isn't a slogan. It's the guiding principle, everything we have done and must keep on doing. On the economy, on national security, on protecting our borders. The British people had to look us in the eye and see that we can serve their interests. And that work doesn't stop now. It never stops. The changes we've made are permanent, irreversible, and we must keep going. We ran as a changed Labour Party, and we will govern as a changed Labour Party. I don't promise you it will be easy. Changing a country is not like flicking a switch. It's hard work, patient work, determined work, and we will have to get moving immediately. But even when the going gets tough, and it will, remember, tonight and always, what this is all about. Now, I may have mentioned my parents a few times in this campaign, once or twice. But the sense of security we had, the comfort they took from believing that Britain would always be better for their children, the hope, not high-minded, not idealistic, but a hope that working-class families like mine could build their lives around. It is a hope that may not burn brightly in Britain at the moment, but we have earned the mandate to relight the fire. That is the purpose of this party and of this government. We said we would end the chaos, and we will. We said we would turn the page, and we have. Today we start the next chapter, begin the work of change, the mission of national renewal, and start to rebuild our country. Thank you.
One breaking result to bring you. The Conservatives have managed to hold on to Daventry. This is the former seat of the former Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris. He wasn't standing this time, but the Conservative candidate Stuart Andrew just about managing to hang on in Daventry. Right, we can speak now to the SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn, who joins us now. Well, I have to say it's been almost a complete collapse in the vote for the Scottish National Party. You've said that you need to listen to what voters are saying. What are they telling you?
Well, they've obviously told us that they don't want to vote for the Scottish National Party this time around, and it's been a very bleak election for the party. We've lost a huge number of very valued colleagues. It's not a reflection on them, it's not a reflection on their work in Westminster. It's just a tsunami, a Starmer tsunami that has swept over us, and it's not just that, actually. It's something bigger. You know, the party's not been in the place it should have been over the course of recent times. I think we all accept that. There's different reasons as to why that's the case, and it's incumbent upon us now to have that internal, robust, frank discussion about what's went wrong, how do we fix it, and how do we rebuild the trust that we've so clearly lost.
There have been, as you say, many factors behind this. Just to name a couple, you would think the fact that, you know, key figures in your party being arrested, 3 leaders without an election. Is John Swinney still the man to lead the party?
Yeah, of course he is. There's nobody better to rebuild the SNP from the foundations that small foundations that we now have than John Swinney. It's been an incredibly tough night for all of us, but we need someone who can lead us into the future, who can bring us all together, who can open the curtains and look at some of the skeletons that are behind there and make sure that we accept the problems that we faced and we rebuild, we refocus and we bring the Scottish National Party
on the
back to trust.
programme today. Stephen Swin there of the SNP. So much more coming up next. Stay with us. Good morning, live from Westminster on a historic day in British politics. Labour has won a landslide victory in the general election and Keir Starmer is to become the UK's next Prime Minister. He'll run the country with one of the largest ever parliamentary majorities, becoming the first Labour leader to win a general election in almost 2 decades.
Today we start the next chapter, begin the work of change, the mission of national renewal, and start to rebuild our country.
Conceding defeat, Rishi Sunak admitted voters had rejected the Conservative Party after 14 years in power.
The British people have delivered a sobering verdict tonight. There is much to learn and reflect on, and I take responsibility for the loss.
In one of the most dramatic moments of the election, the former Prime Minister Liz Truss loses to Labour. Mordaunt, Grant Shapps, Gillian Keegan and Jacob Rees-Mogg were also voted out as 11 cabinet ministers lost their seats. It was also a night of success for the Liberal Democrats, at Davey celebrating their best results in recent history. And Reform leader Nigel Farage says he's coming after Labour after winning a seat in Parliament at the 8th attempt. In Scotland, a hugely disappointing night for the SNP, who fall victim to a resurgent Labour Party north of the border. Well, this is the scene in Downing Street this morning, where later today we will witness only the second change of government in 27 years. So Keir Starmer, set to become the first Labour leader elected Prime Minister at a general election since Tony Blair's landmark victory in 1997. Hello and good morning from Westminster on this historic day for the United Kingdom. Labour has won the general election in a landslide victory and Sir Keir Starmer will become the country's next Prime Minister. After 14 years of Conservative rule, Rishi Sunak conceded defeat a little before 5 this morning, saying it had been a sobering night for his party. A record-breaking 11 cabinet ministers have lost their seats. And 2, in perhaps the biggest shock of the election, has Liz Truss, Mr Sunak's predecessor as Prime Minister. Well, Labour's now won more than 400 seats in a landslide, second only to Tony Blair's in 1997. Worth just pausing to look at the numbers on this historic day that we have. You can see there, Labour on a total of 409 seats. That is their best result since Tony Blair's in 1997. Remember, they only had 202 in 2019. The Conservatives, though, well, it's been a record-breaking night for them. They're only on 120 seats, only around a third of the 365 seats they won under Boris Johnson. That is the biggest total seat loss of any Conservative party in their history. A big night for the Liberal Democrats as well, on 71 seats in total. I think we can see the latest pictures now of Rishi Sunak. He's arriving at the party headquarters in London, travelling down from his North Yorkshire constituency. He did hold on, of course, in Richmond, but with a greatly reduced majority. Later on, of course, he'll be making his final speech as Prime Minister, the man who has just entered the history books as the man who led Britain's most successful political party to their worst ever loss of seats at a general election. We're expecting him to be walking out of that car very shortly to go and talk to the people at Conservative Party headquarters, the people, of course, who gave everything to that campaign, who tried to make his big gamble work, but the decision to call the general election ending in failure.
Do you blame yourself, Rishi Sunak?
Well, the door shuts. We will, of course, see him later, of course, in Downing Street. Throughout the morning, we are going to be following this historic day, the transfer of power, with a panel of guests, plus Sam Coates and Adam Bolton, of course, giving us their full analysis and reaction to what's been a momentous night Ben Bradshaw is here for the Labour Party, plus Sir Charles Walker for the Conservatives. We'll have lots from you later on. First, though, I do just want to bring you the story of how this big election win for Labour unfolded. Jason Farrell has the story of the night.
Walking into the biggest job in British politics. Today, the country will have a new Prime Minister. After 14 years of opposition,
we did it!
Labour are back in power.
People will be waking up to the news, relieved that a weight has been lifted, a burden finally removed from the shoulders of this great nation. And now we can look forward again, walk into the morning, the sunlight of hope, pale at first, but getting stronger through the day, shining once again on a country with the opportunity after 14 years to get its future back.
His slogan was change, and that's coming for him and his family. It's change too for a string of Conservative big hitters who've lost their seats. The biggest scalp, former Prime Minister Liz Truss losing what should be a safe seat in Norfolk South West.
It's not so much that Labour won this election, but rather that the Conservatives have lost it.
The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, and the leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, won't be going back there.
Our renewal as a party and a country will not be achieved by us talking to an ever smaller slice of ourselves, but by being guided by the people of this country.
7 cabinet ministers fell when Blair won in 1997. The Tories had already lost more than that as Rishi Sunak arrived for his result in Richmond.
Shapps, gone. Chalk, gone. Mordaunt, gone. Keegan, gone. Hart, gone. Fraser, gone. Mercer, gone.
This will go down as the biggest electoral miscalculation ever in terms of the timing of when he called this.
Sunak held on to his seat, but conceded defeat to Labour.
The Labour Party has won this general election, and I have called Sir Keir Starmer to congratulate him on his victory. Today, power will change hands in a peaceful and orderly manner, with goodwill on all sides. That is something that should give us all confidence in our country's stability and future. The British people have delivered a sobering verdict tonight. There is much to learn and reflect on, and I take responsibility for the loss.
This wasn't just Labour's night. Reform took large chunks out of the Tory vote. Defector Lee Anderson won in Ashfield. And more than 30 years after he fought his first by-election, Nigel Farage became an MP for the first time on his 8th attempt.
Half of the vote is simply an anti-Conservative vote. This Labour government will be in trouble very, very quickly. We will now be targeting Labour votes. We're coming for Labour, be in no doubt about that.
Other big Tory names fell, among them former Brexit Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg. And it was a night of celebration for the Lib Dems. Ed Davey's party having its biggest night in more than a century.
What I've loved most hasn't been the paddleboarding or the bungee jumping. It's been speaking to people here in Kingston and Surbiton and across the United Kingdom about the challenges they face and their hopes for the future.
It's been a bruising night for the SNP. Their vote collapsed across Scotland, with Labour mopping them up.
We've had a really difficult and damaging result, and we will have to think long and hard about the implications of the results in Scotland tonight.
Labour had upsets too. The Green Party co-leader Clara Denyer deposing the Shadow Culture Secretary in Bristol Central. Expelled former leader Jeremy Corbyn beat his old party to retain Islington North. And former Shadow Health Secretary Jonathan Ashworth lost Leicester South to a pro-Palestinian independent. The Labour vote has been dented in Muslim areas. Jess Phillips just won in Birmingham Yardley, but was booed by opponents. Since the countdown to the exit poll at 10 p.m. last night, watched in anticipation around the country, what's emerged is roughly what the polls had been predicting, an historic and crushing defeat for the Conservatives.
Since COVID, Partygate, the Johnson, Truss and Sunak administrations, this is the first time the British people have been able to pass judgment on this government, and the verdict is damning.
But voters have not flocked solely to Labour. It's a fragmented picture, and despite a landslide and a large majority, Starmer has many challenges ahead. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, if you're just waking up, the story this morning, Labour has won the general election, and not only won it, they've got a landslide. We can look now at the numbers on this historic day, because you can see there Keir Starmer's Labour Party on a total of 409 seats. Keir Starmer to be the next Prime Minister. The Conservatives, though, have had a record-breaking night for all the wrong reasons. They've lost more seats in a general election than at any time in their history. They're only on 120 seats. The Lib Dems, a record-breaking night for the right reasons. 71 seats for the Liberal Democrats. That is their best ever seat total. It's been a, frankly, disastrous night, though, for the Scottish National Party. They're down to just 9 seats in total. The Green Party on 4 seats in total, so a good night there for the Green Party, picking up 4 seats, quadrupling their previous number. And Reform have won their first 4 seats, a young party, of course. That includes Nigel Farage becoming the new MP for Clacton. There is one breaking result that I do want to bring you now, because it does go against the story of the night, because you can see there the Labour Party have lost Birmingham Perry Barr in the West Midlands. The former MP there, Khalid Mahmood, losing to the independent candidate there by just 507 votes. So it was closely run, but you can see there the independent candidate, Ayub Khan, on 13,303. Khalid Mahmood, the Labour Party candidate, on 12,796. Just want to have a quick chat here to Adam Bolton and Sam Coates about this. Not to take away from the absolutely storming majority that Labour have got, but underneath the bonnet of that result, we are seeing some independent candidates, some candidates from George Galloway's party, either running Labour pretty close or, in the case of Birmingham, taking it all together.
I think this reinforces the sense that in some ways this has been quite a negative election, and the things motivating voters in quite a lot of areas, whether it was getting out the Tories, whether it was punishing the SNP, or here, whether it was voting against what is perceived to be an establishment position on the Middle East, voters are seeking to punish as much as they are seeking to reward. And here we have another independent matching some of the others around the country. And some of those with party affiliations and some of those familiar names have also ridden this wave. We have, kind of almost astonishingly, Jeremy Corbyn back in Islington, who I think campaigned a lot on this issue. You have Thangam Debonair, who yesterday was a member of the shadow cabinet, out in her Bristol seat to the Greens. And again, I think that this issue has played quite a big role in that decision by the voters there. So single issues clearly really motivating larger numbers of people than I can remember at any election since 2005 and the Iraq War. Labour won again then. But it was, I think it's been quite stark.
And Jonathan Ashworth losing in Leicester. So, you know, we've now got a group in Parliament. I mean, never mind the effect on other seats. We've got a group in Parliament, maybe about half a dozen people, including Jeremy Corbyn, who are saying the number one issue is the Palestinian issue. And I think most people would say with hindsight that Keir Starmer did make that initial misstep when he appeared to say that cutting off water was was a legitimate approach, although he tried to row back on it. But, it's very interesting because this is an absolute blue touch paper issue. And one wonders, on the other side, what the Reform MPs are going to make of it, talking about, ethnic diversity in the UK and maybe trying to weaponise that factor of Muslim voters in the UK as well. So, this is one of the things that's going to be very delicate for Keir Starmer, although, it's always struck me as paradoxical that this is such a motivating issue, since there's absolutely nothing that the UK can do to affect what happens in the Middle East.
Thank you both very much indeed. As you see there, Birmingham, Perry-Barr, won by the independent candidate, Labour losing control of that seat. Just to recap, if you've missed it, which I'm sure you haven't, Labour have won. Keir Starmer going to number 10 Downing Street with a landslide majority. On this historic day, we are going to be following the two party leaders as the transfer of power takes place and, of course, talking you through the numbers and what it all means as well. Labour on a total of 409 seats. That is a doubling of their seats in the last election. The Conservatives down to 120. The loss of 248 seats, their worst ever. We can now take a look at the scale of the victory for the Labour Party and go to Ali Fortescue, who has got some screens for us. She's been crunching some numbers. Ali.
Morning, Sophie. Yeah, what a night. And this is it. We've had the exit poll, we've had weeks of polling, but now we've got the actual numbers and we've got a whole new map of Britain. Look at this. It's completely different. You'll remember last time, the sea of blue, that extraordinary, unexpected coalition of votes that Boris Johnson so neatly knitted together. You could walk from the northwest to the northeast on Tory blue. Well, look at this. They have rebuilt that red wall. You can see all the Lib Dem gains here in the south. And, of course, the other big story is Scotland up here. Big Labour resurgence in Scotland. We are waking up today to a whole new political map in the UK. And let's have a look at what that means. We've heard the word historic this morning, and that is what this looks like for the Conservatives. This is vote share results so far, 22%. When did we last see that? We'll look back through here, through the 1970s, the 1950s, 1920s, all the way back to 1835, when the whole system was basically reformed. The new Tory party became more like what it is now. So this is completely historic when you look back. Not seen anything like this since 1835. So where have all those votes gone? Well, this is a sort of state of the parties in terms of votes won or lost. I mean, you can see here the scale of the Conservatives' loss, particularly when you think that they came from a high mark in 2019. A lot of those votes going to Labour. Worse than we are seeing a few Labour losses, part of that down to that Gaza effect, people like Jonathan Ashworth, the big losers from that. It's been a great night for the Lib Dems, hasn't it? They have got nearly 7 times the number of seats that they got back in 2019, and a terrible night for the SNP as well. But this is what's really interesting, because the picture is actually more complicated from the Labour Party than you might first think. The scale of their landslide in terms of seats is big compared to 1997. But when you look at the actual vote share, so this is how many people are actually, voting for Labour, look at this. This is as we progress through the night and more seats are announced. Labour are well below 1997. In fact, they are below 2017 when Jeremy Corbyn was leader. That is really interesting. And part of that is down to this. So this is other parties, not the two main parties. Parties like the Lib Dems and Reform. Look how well they've done in terms of vote share. We haven't seen anything like that since 1918. So a good night for those parties. And I want to look a bit more closely at Reform, because these are seats where Reform came second. Some of them are those kind of Tory red wall seats that were won by Boris Johnson. Now the Conservatives not even second in those seats. And this is a really important part of the picture for the night. So this down at the bottom is how the percentage of people that voted for Brexit in any given seat, as you'd expect. These more Remain voting seats, you're seeing green. And as you get further this way, last time round, there was much more blue round here. Boris Johnson, with that Get Brexit Done message, really winning over many of those Labour voters. They are all going red now. Look at this. And you can see some reform up over here. So a lot of red down at this end of the table. And of course, with these sorts of results for the Conservative Party come big names that have lost their seats. And I just wanted to select a couple of those. Portsmouth North. This is Penny Mordaunt's seat. She was fighting so hard. She was missing some big kind of Conservative events to fight that seat. It's always been a bellwether seat. It's gone with the winning party, and it's done that this time. A slim majority for the new Labour MP there. But she, Penny Mordaunt, expected to be someone who would want to run for the leadership, one of the favourites with the bookies. She is out in Portsmouth North. Well, in Hatfield, this is Grant Shapps' seat. He has gone as well. The interesting thing you see from this is Reform. Look at that in third place. And if you added their votes to the Conservative vote, they would have got over the line. And this, I mean, this could be the moment of the night. Liz Truss, this is one of the safest Conservative seats, really, Norfolk South West. Liz Truss has lost that seat very narrowly, the new Labour MP there, with a majority of 630. So, yeah, some pretty extraordinary results coming in. And let's just lastly have a quick look at this. This says it all, really. Here you go, 2019, as I was saying, this incredible result for Boris Johnson, winning those red wall seats. And look at this. This is a sea of red, really. This is the night for Keir Starmer, and you can see those Reform, those 4 seats that have come in so far. Not quite what the exit poll had predicted so far. And, of course, down here, the Lib Dem resurgence. They never really came back since after the coalition years. Well, Ed Davey has had a really good night, and the contrast, pretty plain to see, the state of the parties. Whatever way you look at it, it's a big night for Labour and a devastating night for the Conservatives.
Ali, thank you very much indeed. Ali Fortescue there on a devastating result for the Conservative Party. You're looking now at pictures of Rishi Sunak arriving at Conservative Party HQ, travelling down from his constituency, effectively to face the music. The Conservatives have now lost a total of 248 seats. The previous record for the most seats lost by the Conservative Party was 246. Back in 1906. So a difficult night for Rishi Sunak, a devastating night for his party as well. I'm sure that long journey down from North Yorkshire felt awfully long for the Prime Minister. He's headed into Conservative HQ. He's still in there talking to the troops, the people, of course, who put their everything into this election campaign, who tried to make his big gamble of the early election work. No words to the reporters as the door closes. Later on, of course, we are expecting him to be walking out that door after speaking to staff members and campaigners at Conservative Party headquarters, and then going to Downing Street, where, of course, he will be... I thought that might have been Rishi Sunak, but it wasn't, obviously. We'll keep a close eye on that door. He'll be heading to Downing Street, where, of course, he will give his final speech as Prime Minister. Our political correspondent, Murray Aurora, is standing by for us. A devastating night for Rishi Sunak. I wonder how he's going to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely, Sophie. And, you know, to be a fly on the wall in that meeting at Conservative Party HQ as the Prime Minister, no longer the Prime Minister, speaking to the troops, as you say, presumably apologising for a historic defeat, a painful defeat for the Conservative Party, and an incredible landslide majority for the Labour Party. So once Rishi Sunak has done that at headquarters, we expect him to come back here to Downing Street, not only to pack his bags, but also to later this morning make a statement, make a speech. So we're expecting that statement to be around 10:30 this morning. We then expect Rishi Sunak to travel to Buckingham Palace to formally tender his resignation to the King. Then we expect Keir Starmer, our new Prime Minister, to have that kind of formal audience with the King. The King will ask him to form a government, and then he will be driven down the Mall to here, Downing Street, before he makes a statement as the first statement as the new Prime Minister of the UK, before meeting his team, but also appointing his cabinet. And it'll be interesting to see who he has in his cabinet, how much kind of shuffle and churn there will be. We know, for instance, Jonathan Ashworth was his shadow Paymaster General, who lost his seat overnight. So we could see some interesting moves and shakes when it comes to the new cabinet under Keir Starmer. But that's the timeline. I think what's important to remember is we were talking about that Ming Vase approach, weren't we, for the Labour Party? And it appears that actually the Labour Party have succeeded in carrying that Ming Vase all the way to 10 Downing Street without making a mess, without smashing it. And as you say, there are some interesting polling results coming out overnight. Perry Barr, for instance. So Labour will have to do some analysis on where they've got wrong, essentially, in some of those seats they've lost. But nonetheless, it is a stonking majority. Keir Starmer is our next Prime Minister. And he was talking about hope this morning, trying to bring some hope, positivity and sunlight into politics after what he would say would be a dark 14 years. So all to wait for, this morning in Downing Street. And Sky News will be bringing you all the twists and turns. As soon as we have any updates from Downing Street, we'll bring it straight to you, Sophie.
We'll be going straight back to you as well as soon as there's any movement behind that door. Mari, thank you very much indeed. Right, let's talk to our panel now, shall we? Ben Bradshaw is here for the Labour Party. Good to have you here. And Sir Charles Walker for the Conservatives. It feels we should go to you first, Charles, if that's OK, because I hate to do it. I can see you trying to shift it onto Ben there. But really, it does feel, in many ways, the story of the night is voters turning away from the Conservative Party. David Cameron he obviously didn't lose, but, the former seats of David Cameron, Theresa May going, Liz Truss losing her seat. I mean, this is a verdict on 14 years.
Yeah, look, it's an awful night. I mean, it's dreadful. Every time you've reminded your viewers of how bad it was off camera, I've been wincing. Ben's been having a smile. I've been wincing. It's been terrible. I mean, it's been a good night for men in their late middle ages. Ed Davey, Nigel Farage, Keir Starmer, they've had wonderful nights. Keir Starmer, the best of all of them. But for my party, it has been a really, really long night. And I stupidly, at 2 o'clock or just after 2 on an earlier Sky News programme, picked a fight with the exit poll, saying it was wrong. We were going to do better than 131.
You didn't say you'd eat your hat, did you?
No, I didn't. But it seems that we've actually done worse. And it's bitterly disappointing. And the Prime Minister will be bitterly disappointed. And he will bear this loss on his shoulders because that's the type of man that he is. He's a top man and a decent man.
We've got the story of the Conservative Party and the losses there. And then, of course, this huge majority for Labour. You were there in '97. Do you feel as if it's a similar, I guess, feeling of kind of exuberance that is leading voters into this election, or do you think it's more muted?
No, certainly not exuberance leading voters into the election. I think there'll be exuberance among my Labour colleagues, with one or two sad exceptions where we've seen these idiosyncratic results. But the mood of the public's been very different, and I think Keir's recognised that with the approach to the campaign he's had of the so-called Ming Vase strategy. And the expectations, I think, of the public are much lower. And the result's very different. I mean, as you've pointed out, the share of the vote is not high by historical standards. A lot of that, I would say, is tactical voting. A lot of Labour voters voting Lib Dem in those seats where they think the Lib Dems have a better chance to beat the Tories. But there will be exuberance, but I also think caution, and Keir will be very aware about the size of this mandate, the nature of it, and the challenge ahead, and as well the need to address some of these issues which has led to some of my very good colleagues losing their seats in exceptional results.
It feels like we should kind of look forward a little bit at this sort of juncture in the day as well. We're, of course, going to be waiting to hear from Rishi Sunak, but where do you think the Conservative Party needs to go next? Because, look, it's a bit of a cliche to say there'll be a battle for its soul going on, but that is what's going to happen, isn't it?
So, I mean, I don't mean to sound glib, it should go to ground for a few weeks, if not months, and really think about what it wants to do. I'm afraid one of the low points of the night was Suella Braverman's speech in her constituency, which I thought was just so out of order, so unnecessary, to fire the starting gun on a leadership contest and putting her name out there straight away, I just thought was a very, very unattractive thing to do. And I fear that the ill-discipline that's bedevilled my party for the past 2 years is now so deeply embedded in its veins that actually we're gonna tear ourselves apart for the next few months.
Do you blame them for the size of this loss?
Look, everybody, I'm a Conservative, we all have to take the blame. We all have to carry the blame on our shoulders. This was a collective enterprise and we failed miserably. And to blame the Prime Minister solely for it would be entirely wrong.
Charles, what do you think should happen next? Does Rishi Sunak stay on to allow the kind of long contest that you want? Should there be a pro tem leader? What do you think should happen today, tomorrow, over the next few weeks?
Well, I know what I would like. I would like the Prime Minister, he's still the Prime Minister for the next few hours, to stay on and say that we're going to have a proper think about this and there will be a new leader of the Conservative Party late in this year or perhaps early into next year. But we've got to understand what happened. There's lots of conjecture at the moment in studios and I'm sure around the country in constituencies about what went wrong. We need to really understand what went wrong.
But do we really think Rishi Sunak should be at Prime Minister's questions from the opposition benches at the dispatch box for weeks and weeks and weeks? That's not realistic, is it?
Well, you know, that's a really good question, but I put it this way. The alternative is pretty horrible as well. So, look, we've got probably 3 sitting weeks till recess. The Prime Minister, soon to be leader of the opposition, could do PMQs. We have the summer recess. And then, yeah, we can make that decision in the fullness of time. But I think right now, a precipitous leadership contest would be absolutely toxic.
Do you think there need to be changes in the rules, or are you happy to leave?
No, I've always said that our membership should not have any involvement in the selection of our party leader or Prime Minister when they're in office. I mean, I absolutely made that clear 2.5 years ago when we ended up with a third going to Penny Mordaunt, a third going to Liz Truss and a third going to Rishi Sunak, and we ended up with Liz Truss.
Ben, I know you don't have long, so I just want a thought from you on the challenge ahead for Keir Starmer. As you said, he's going to be kind of been like carefully carrying that Ming bars. It feels like the size of the majority is almost made of the same stuff. What do you think he needs to do when he addresses the public from the steps of number 10?
Well, I think he'll address the public as Prime Minister in a way which he's done all throughout the campaign, that he is a Prime Minister who will put the country before party. He's going to have to do an immediate reshuffle because he's lost a couple of his shadow cabinet members. And I think what you see is what you have seen is what you will get from Keir as Prime Minister. I don't think there'll be any big surprises. It'll be about quiet competence, delivery and trying to rebuild the trust of the people in politics as a whole.
OK, thank you very much indeed. We are going to be bringing you the story of the night here on Sky News, but also the story of the day as the transfer of power goes ahead. And, of course, a big part of the story will be these guys, the Liberal Democrats. You can tell it's them by those splashes of yellow as they await for their leader, Davey, to come and give a speech in central London. I should say it's been a very good night for the Liberal Democrats. They've won a total of 71 seats. That's up 63, 12% of the total vote share across the country. And that is their highest ever total of MPs for the Liberal Democrats. Let's remind you again of the story you are waking up to this morning, and what a story it is. Labour has won the general election in dramatic style. Let's just show you now some of the key numbers of the night. So Keir Starmer is entering number 10 with a landslide majority. He's got 409 seats, currently tracking second only to Tony Blair in 1997. So a huge win for the Labour Party. The Conservatives, though, down on 120 seats in total. That's down 20% when it comes to their vote share, and they are having a record-breaking night for all of the wrong reasons. They are lost the most amount of seats, more than any other Conservative party ever in an election. Let's listen now, shall we, to Sir Keir Starmer. He was speaking earlier on today at a Labour celebratory event in London's Tate Modern, updating his campaign message from change to change begins.
We did it! You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now. And it feels good, I have to be honest. 4.5 years of work changing the party. This is what it is for. A changed Labour Party, ready to serve our country, ready to restore Britain to the service of working people. And across our country, people will be waking up to the news, relieved that a weight has been lifted, a burden finally removed from the shoulders of this great nation. And now we can look forward again, walk into the morning, the sunlight of hope, pale at first, but getting stronger through the day, shining once again on a country with the opportunity after 14 years to get its future back. And I want to thank each and every one of you here for campaigning so hard for change. And not just in this campaign either. Also for these 4.5 years changing our party. The Labour movement is always everything's achieved, past and future, down to the efforts of its people. So thank you truly. You have changed our country. But a mandate like this comes with a great responsibility. Our task is nothing less than renewing the ideas that hold this country together. National renewal. Whoever you are, wherever you started in life, if you work hard, if you play by the rules, this country should give you a fair chance to get on. It should always respect your contribution, and we have to restore that. And alongside that, we have to return politics to public service. Show that politics can be a force for good. Make no mistake, that is the great test of politics in this era. The fight for trust is the battle that defines our age. It is why we've campaigned so hard on demonstrating we are fit for public service. Service is the precondition for hope. Respect, the bond that can unite a country. Together, the values of this changed Labour Party are the guiding principle for a new government. Country first, party second. That is the responsibility of this mandate. You know, 14 years ago, we were told that we're all in it together. I say to the British people today, imagine what we can do if that were actually true. So, by all means, enjoy this moment. Nobody can say you haven't waited patiently. Enjoy the feeling of waking up on a morning like this, with the emotion that you do see the country through the same eyes. Hold on to it, because it is what unity is made from. But use it to show to the rest of the country, as we must, that this party has changed, that we will serve them faithfully, govern for every single person in this country. But also, don't forget how we got here. This morning, we can see that the British people have voted to turn the page on 14 years. But don't pretend that there was anything inevitable about that. There's nothing preordained in politics.
It's not good.
We're just going to leave Keir Starmer's speech there because we have just got pictures of Rishi Sunak, still Prime Minister, leaving Conservative Party headquarters. He's already in the car. He is going to be driving off to Downing Street. And we're going to take you straight to Sir Ed Davey there. You can see the Lib Dem coloured confetti and the applause. And a fist pump too. You can tell it was a good night for Ed Davey. 71 seats won by the Liberal Democrat leader as he goes to meet party supporters and staff members in central London. Punching the air, you can see the delight in a well-run campaign for the Liberal Democrats. We are expecting him to address those supporters. The Lib Dems have won a record number of seats. They've won an extra 63 seats compared to the last election, which really is an extraordinary result, unseating so many Conservatives, particularly, of course, in the South and the South West. Oh, I can't resist a high five as well.
Thank you.
And are waiting for, here we go.
And I didn't even have to paraglide in. I just want to thank you all for what you've done, your hard work. You know, you have helped rebuild our party. You've helped ensure that the Liberal Democrats are winning again. You have helped us get our best results for over 100 years. So I really want to thank you, and I want to thank the millions of voters who want change and who've looked to the Liberal Democrats to deliver that change and who've put your trust in us and our candidates, now your MPs. They will be your local champions. They will fight for the fair deal that you deserve. So thank you for putting your trust in us. And, you know, trust is a very precious commodity. It's hard won. And sometimes you've lost it, you lose it. And you have to work very hard to win it back. And I want to thank people for trusting us again. We will not let you down. We will honour your trust. And we will keep working so you keep putting your trust in us. I like to think we've done that by listening to you, by hearing your concerns. And that is why in this campaign, we fought a really positive campaign about your concerns, about how we wanted to make sure you got help with the cost of living and the difficult economic circumstances. We listened to you on the environment and your concerns about the appalling sewage scandal, and that's why we have policies to tackle that. And above all, we listen to you about your concerns about the crisis in our health system, in our care system. And that's why we put solving that, fixing that, right at the heart of our agenda. During this campaign, I've told you about my own story of caring and being a carer for much of my life. And I want to thank all the people who've
come to me and responded in such generosity, telling me that my story is your story. And I want to make sure that we represent the millions of carers out there as we rebuild our health system and do something special to support carers and care workers. And I think if we do that, we can earn your trust. So I promise you, having put it at the heart of our agenda, we are now going to work on health and care. We're going to go to Parliament to represent you. Our first campaign that starts today is a campaign for emergency budget this month for health and care. Every one of our record number of Liberal Democrat MPs is going to go to Parliament to campaign for that emergency budget for health and care. They're going to stand up for their local health service, their local care service that you rely on. They're going to stand up for the policies, whether it's getting more GPs, more NHS dentists, free personal care, that will fix the system. Every Liberal Democrat MP will be a voice for carers. And we are going to make sure that your voice is heard like never before. That is the fair deal that we fought on. That is the fair deal that all Liberal Democrat MPs and our whole party want to deliver. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve you. And my invitation to you is come and join us and help us turn around our country and transform our health and care system, transform our political system, and bring the better, brighter, fairer future our country so desperately needs. Thank you.
Well, triumphant Sir Ed Davey there in central London, guiding his party, of course, to a record number of seats, 71 at this general election. We're joined now by the Lib Dem Deputy Leader, Daisy Cooper. An extraordinary night for the Lib Dems across the country, and also, I guess, for you personally, I think one of the biggest majorities in the country you've now got.
Yeah, we've had a record-breaking set of results for the Liberal Democrats, and it's very humbling, but it's also very, very exciting. We've got now a huge number of Liberal Democrat MPs that will come to Parliament next week, and every single one of them will be a strong voice to campaign to save our NHS and fix social care. And as you just heard from Ed Davey, our party leader, the first thing that we're calling for is an emergency health and social care budget, because we know that health services are on their knees, and we've heard time and time again on the doorstep that people want that to be our number one priority.
I think they engaged in our message, and because we were showing a fun side, I think we were able to talk about our serious policies. You know, when I fell off the paddleboard in Lake Windermere, we talked about... You enjoyed it more than I do. We talked about the sewage scandal, which people are worried about in every community across our country. When I came down that slide in Somerset with children enjoying their half-term with their families, I talked about the mental health crisis in our country, how hundreds of thousands of children and young people are waiting for treatment, and how Liberal Democrats have come forward, only the Liberal Democrats have come forward with a policy to get a qualified mental health professional in every primary and secondary school. So yes, we've had some fun, but we've had some very serious issues. And when I talked about my own story, which is, I think, pretty serious, I've had a few challenges, but the challenge I've had as a carer throughout my life are challenges that millions of other people face. And I think people related to our stunts, but they're related to our stories. I'm very grateful to people for putting their trust in us, and we're going to work hard for them every day.
And just talk me through that moment when the exit polls came in and you realised that this was going to be a very big night.
I was with my wife at home, and I think I jumped off the sofa. But, you know, the exit polls were wrong. We did even better than the exit polls.
clearly this is a big night for you, but given the, the collapse of the Tory party, is this just a one-off for you?
Absolutely not. We are going to show in this Parliament that we will stand up for those millions of people who are desperate for change, who want their health and care systems transformed, who want the economy to grow, but also to make sure it grows in a fair way where people's concerns with the costs of living are actually addressed. And their concerns about the environment, whether it's the sewage scandal, whether it's other aspects of nature being harmed, or whether it's the climate change. We will stand up for those people, and this will not be a one-off. We will win. We've not just won these seats, we're going to win them back again by showing that we will work for people, be their local champions, and be their voice in Parliament.
And just on that, I mean, Labour has a massive mandate. Do you really expect to influence their policies?
Yes, because we've got the best ideas. We have the most ambitious programme that's well thought through, and I think we will argue it in Parliament. And I would challenge anyone, whichever party, to listen to our ideas, engage with us. We want to work collaboratively with people from all parties to put the national interest first and make sure we do transform our health and care system, deal with all the many challenges facing our country. I'm afraid the Conservatives have left our country in a mess. And it will take some time, but we're committed to transforming our country and helping people who depend on the health service, who aren't getting the care they need, and who want our economy to prosper.
And one of those Conservatives is Jeremy Hunt. That's obviously a seat you were targeting. Are you slightly disappointed you didn't edge him out?
Well, it's always great to be Conservatives. We did a lot of that. And do we want to beat more Conservatives? Yes, we do. And that's what we're going to do. We're already now turning our mind to how we win people's trust in seats that we didn't win. Pull them over to our side, whoever won those seats. We want to show in the way we behave, the way we conduct ourselves, the quality of our arguments, and the style of which we put them over, that people are won over to our cause.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, let's bring Daisy Cooper back in, shall we? You spoke a little bit about it before we heard from Davey, but I guess what I'm interested in is, what are you going to use those 71 MPs for? Is the idea to, I guess, try and push Keir Starmer to spend a bit more money on public services?
Well, look, during the general election, we were very clear about our priorities. We said time and again it's about fixing the NHS and social care, taking real action on the cost of living, and then protecting our local environment, including by putting an end to the scandal of raw sewage dumping. Those were our three priorities during the general election campaign. They're going to be our three priorities in the next Parliament as well.
My other question is, you've obviously got an awful lot of seats in England. You've only won 2 seats north of the Humber. Are you effectively a southern party?
No, we've won seats in Scotland as well. In fact, we've got seats from, Land's End to John O'Groats. In fact, we have both the seats that have Land's End and John O'Groats in them. So we've got seats the length and breadth of the country, and that will give us a real richness and diversity of views in Parliament. We've got rural seats, urban seats, seats all over, from the West Country and from the home counties. I think we're going to have a fantastic set of new MPs that will speak for all corners of the UK.
If you're just joining us this morning, just to bring you up to date with the outcome of the general election, because Keir Starmer has won. The Labour Party will form the next government. We will, of course, hear shortly from Rishi Sunak in Downing Street as well, as he faces the music and defends that huge loss of seat that he has led his party to, just 120 seats for the Conservative Party. We can join now by the former Conservative MP, former Justice Secretary, David Gork. Do you want to say I told you so? Is that how you're feeling today?
I don't really want to strike that tone, but I do think that the Conservative Party has got a lot to do to recover its reputation for economic competence, general credibility, to some extent honesty, because of what happened in the Boris Johnson period. And I think you do have to go back to the direction the party decided to go in sort of over the 2016-2019 period. And large parts of the traditional Conservative support has felt neglected. It's felt that the Conservative Party has drifted away from them. And the Liberal Democrats, who have had a terrific night, have taken advantage of that and won a vast number of seats for a third party. And in places like Surrey and Hertfordshire, where I used to represent, where Daisy represents, Oxfordshire and so on, the Liberal Democrats have had a very good night. And if the Conservatives go off in a particular direction pursuing reform voters, and obviously Reform have done well, but go in that direction, I'm afraid there are more seats that will go to the Liberal Democrats. So, they might not be done yet. And I think that is a lesson from this general election.
I want to just ask about perhaps one of the big moments tonight. David Gauke, how did you feel when Liz Truss lost her seat?
I have to say, I think Liz Truss's time as Prime Minister was a big contributory factor to what has happened to the Conservatives. That loss of reputation for economic competence, it had taken a few knocks already, but those 49 days were devastating. And, this is a pretty brutal system. And, Liz Truss has heard the voice of
Did she deserve
the
to
British
lose?
people. It's hard to argue that she didn't.
OK, interesting to speak to you both. We'll have lots more coming up after the break. If you're just joining us, it has been an extraordinary night in British politics. So Keir Starmer winning the election with a landslide majority, and very shortly we're expecting to be hearing from the outgoing Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Boy, that's going to be a difficult speech. Good morning, live from Westminster on what is a historic day in British politics. Labour has won a landslide victory in the general election, and Sir Keir Starmer is to become the UK's next Prime Minister. He'll run the country with one of the largest ever parliamentary majorities, becoming the first Labour leader to win a general election in almost 2 decades.
Today we start the next chapter, begin the work of change, the mission of national renewal, and start to rebuild our country.
Conceding defeat, Rishi Sunak admitted that voters had rejected the Conservative Party after 14 years in power.
The British people have delivered a sobering verdict tonight. There is much to learn and reflect on, and I take responsibility for the loss.
Well, in one of the most dramatic moments of the election, the former Prime Minister Liz Truss loses to Labour. Mordaunt and Grant Shapps, Gillian Keegan and Jacob Rees-Mogg were also voted out as a record-breaking 11 cabinet ministers lose their seats. It's been a huge night of success for the Lib Dems too, so Davey celebrates as his party wins a record number of seats.
I want to thank people for trusting us again. We will not let you down.
The Reform leader, Nigel Farage, says he's coming after Labour after winning a seat in Parliament at the 8th attempt. In Scotland, a hugely disappointing night for the SNP, who fall victim to a resurgent Labour Party north of the border. Well, this is the scene in Downing Street this morning, where later today we will witness only the second change in government in 27 years. So, Sir Keir Starmer set to become the first Labour leader elected Prime Minister at a general election since Tony Blair's landmark victory in 1997. Hello and good morning from Westminster on this historic day for the United Kingdom. Labour has won the general election in a landslide victory, and Sir Keir Starmer will become the country's next Prime Minister. Well, it's the end of an era after 14 years of Conservative rule. Rishi Sunak conceded defeat a little before 5 this morning, saying it had been a sobering night for his party. We are expecting to hear from him in Downing Street probably sometime about 10:30. A total of 11 cabinet ministers have lost their seats, and that includes, and perhaps the biggest shock of the election, Liz Truss, Mr Sunak's predecessor as Prime Minister, also lost. Labour's won more than 400 seats in a landslide, second only to Tony Blair's in 1997. Well, it is worth pausing and looking at the staggering victory for Keir Starmer. Truly the end of an era in British history after 14 years of the Conservative Party in power. Labour now have 410 seats. That is a record-breaking result for Keir Starmer, only second so far to Tony Blair's victory in 97. A big majority for him in Parliament, and that matters. For Rishi Sunak, though, it's a very different story. He has taken the Conservative Party to their worst ever seat loss. They are now on 120 seats. Record-breaking for the Lib Dems in the other direction. They've won their highest total ever of seats with 71. The SNP down to just 9 seats in Scotland. Truly a very bad night for them. They won 48 in 2019. Reform have managed a total of 4 seats, including victory for Nigel Farage at the 8th attempt in Clacton. The Green Party on 4 seats in total. Well, throughout the day here on Sky News, we'll be discussing the outcome of this remarkable general election with our panel of guests. In this hour, we're joined by the Labour politician Dame Margaret Hodge and the former Conservative Education Secretary Justine Greening. And also with us throughout the day, we have our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates and someone who needs no introduction to Sky News viewers, Adam Bolton as well. More from them shortly. First, though, let's take a look at how this big election win for Labour unfolded. Jason Farrell has the story of the night.
Walking into the biggest job in British politics. Today, the country will have a new Prime Minister. After 14 years of opposition,
we did it!
Labour is back in power.
People will be waking up to the news, relieved that a weight has been lifted, a burden finally removed from the shoulders of this great nation. And now we can look forward again, walk into the morning, the sunlight of hope, pale at first, but getting stronger through the day, shining once again on a country with the opportunity after 14 years to get its future back.
His slogan was change, and that's coming for him and his family. It's change too for this man. Rishi Sunak held on to his seat in Richmond, but at the count conceded defeat to Labour.
This will go down as the biggest electoral miscalculation ever in terms of the timing of when he called this.
The Labour Party has won this general election, and I have called to Keir Starmer to congratulate him on his victory. Today, power will change hands in a peaceful and orderly manner, with goodwill on all sides. That is something that should give us all confidence in our country's stability and future. The British people have delivered a sobering verdict tonight. There is much to learn and reflect on, and I take responsibility for the loss.
19,877.
A string of Conservative cabinet ministers lost their seats. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps first to start the soul-searching.
It's not so much that Labour won this election, but rather that the Conservatives have lost it.
And the leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, won't be going back there.
Our renewal as a party and a country will not be achieved by us talking to an ever smaller slice of ourselves, but by being guided by the people of this country.
In 1997, there were 7 cabinet ministers that lost their position. That has now been matched.
Yeah.
Shapps, gone. Chalk, gone. Mordaunt, gone. Keegan, gone. Hart, gone. Fraser, gone. Mercer, gone.
But the biggest scalp was still to come. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss lost a whopping 26,000 majority, falling behind by 600 votes. This wasn't just Labour's night. Reform took large chunks out of the Tory vote. Defector Lee Anderson won in Ashfield. And more than 30 years after he fought his first by-election, Nigel Farage became an MP for the first time on his 8th attempt.
Half of the vote is simply an anti-Conservative vote. This Labour government will be in trouble very, very quickly. We will now be targeting Labour votes. We're coming for Labour, be in no doubt about that.
Other big Tory names fell, among them former Brexit Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg. And it was a night of celebration for the Lib Dems. Ed Davey's party having its biggest night in more than a century.
What I've loved most hasn't been the paddleboarding or the bungee jumping. It's been speaking to people here in Kingston and Surbiton and across the United Kingdom about the challenges they face and their hopes for the future.
It's been a bruising night for the SNP. Their vote collapsed across Scotland, with Labour mopping them up.
We've had a really difficult and damaging result, and we will have to think long and hard about the implications of the results in Scotland tonight.
Labour had upsets too. The Green Party co-leader Clara Denyer deposing the Shadow Culture Secretary in Bristol Central. Expelled former leader Jeremy Corbyn beat his old party to retain Islington North. And former Shadow Health Secretary Jonathan Ashworth lost Leicester South to a pro-Palestinian independent. The Labour vote has been dented in Muslim areas. Jess Phillips just won in Birmingham Yardley, but was booed by opponents. Since the countdown to the exit poll at 10 p.m. last night, watched in anticipation around the country, what's emerged is roughly what the polls had been predicting, an historic and crushing defeat for the Conservatives.
Since COVID, Partygate, the Johnson, Truss and Sunak administrations, this is the first time the British people have been able to pass judgment on this government, and the verdict is damning.
But voters have not flocked solely to Labour. It's a fragmented picture, and despite a landslide and a large majority, Starmer has many challenges ahead. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, throughout the day, we are going to be crunching the election numbers and discussing what it means for the parties as well. We can go to Ali Forsky now for some of her analysis.
Morning, Sophie. Yes, people are waking up today to a whole new political landscape. And this really is it, Sophie, because we've been talking about the polls and the exit poll, but these are the real numbers. And look at this, how different it is from 2019. All those kind of unexpected votes that Boris Johnson got, building that red wall, well, that has been completely undone by Keir Starmer overnight. You used to be able to walk from the northwest to the northeast on Tory blue seats. No longer. He has rebuilt the red wall. He's made gains all over, really. And then down here, look at this. This is the other big part of the night, the Lib Dem resurgence. They've managed to come back from those low numbers after the coalition years. This has been a really, really good night for Davey. And, of course, the other part of the story is up here in Scotland. And you can see, I mean, this used to be yellow all over, SNP dominance for years under Nicola Sturgeon. No longer. Look at that, a real resurgent Labour Party, the red up here in Scotland. We've heard the word historic used a lot today, Sophie. That is what this is what that looks like. In terms of vote share, for the Conservatives so far, 22% vote share. Have we seen anything like that before? When was the last time we had that? We'll look at this. We can go back through the 90s, the 70s, the 50s, the 20s, all the way back to 1835, when the whole system was basically reformed and the creation of the Conservative Party as we know it. We have not seen results that bad in terms of the vote share since 1835. So a terrible night, whatever way you look at it, for the Conservative Party. Where are those votes going? Well, this is a kind of state of the party's overall picture that gives you a sense of what votes are going where. I mean, clearly it's been a good night for Labour. It's a slightly more complex picture we'll come to in a moment. They have had some losses down to their stance in part on Gaza. Jonathan Ashworth, one of the casualties of that. But look at this. I mean, terrible losses for the Conservatives. Of course, they were coming from quite a high bar as well under Boris Johnson. And as I was saying, a terrific night for the Liberal Democrats. They've got nearly 7 times the 11 seats that they had last time round, and a devastating night for the SNP. They're down 39. But I was saying it's slightly more complicated than it appears, and this is why. Because, yes, you can make comparisons in terms of seats with Tony Blair and 1997, but look at this. This is the vote share, the actual number of people that cast their votes over the course of the evening as the results came in. And look at this. It is actually quite a lot lower than in 1997, and it is even lower than in 2017 when Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the Labour Party. And part of that is down to the fact that a lot of those votes are going to third parties, like reform parties, like the Liberal Democrats. It is a much more complex picture. But this here, this is a sort of state of the new Conservative Party. We have had 10 cabinet ministers that have lost their seat, 12 that attend cabinet, and this is a sort of the way that the cabinet now looks. Look at this. We've got Johnny Mercer, he's out. That was always going to be a tight seat. The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, a Labour gain there. Portsmouth North, this perhaps one of the most significant that could have a big impact on the future of the party, because plenty of people thought that Penny Mordaunt was going to be a future leadership contender for the Conservative Party. It was always going to be a tough race down in Portsmouth North. Well, she has lost that seat to the Labour Party. Worth mentioning some of the people that held on, because, of course, a lot of people had predicted that this would have been a huge moment. The first Chancellor to lose his seat, That hasn't happened. Jeremy Hunt has managed to hold on against a resurgent Lib Dem in Godalming and Ash. This was incredibly close. I think there was about 20 votes in it for the Conservative Party chairman in Basildon and Billericay, accused, of course, of a chicken run to a safer seat. Well, he has managed to hold on. Just to dig in, because this is quite interesting, into some of the big stories of the night. We were talking about Penny Mordaunt. Look at this. Reform have come third here. And if you add their votes to the Conservative vote, she would have quite comfortably got across the line. And the same story in Grant Shapps' seat, where the Reform Party have come third as well. And we can't not mention this, can we? This is perhaps, I mean, it's definitely one of the biggest stories of the night. Liz Truss, former Prime Minister, in one of the safest Conservative seats, really, in the country. She has lost, and Labour have been elected. Pretty slim majority, 630 there. So you've got to ask the question, who is left now to lead the Conservative Party, and what is the kind of shape of the party that will make that decision? Will it end up being someone from the left of the party or the centrist One Nation Conservative group? Tom Tugendhat has survived in Tonbridge, or will it end up being someone from the right? One of the bookies' favourites is Kemi Badenoch, I should say, who's held on to her seat in Essex. Suella Braverman made no secret either of her hopes of being leader of the Conservative Party one day. But I put those two up because they're sort of different sides of the Conservative Party, and that's the sort of battle that we might see now for the soul of the Conservative Party and how they recover after this sort of loss. I'll get up. Oh, sorry, that is actually Tom Tugendhat's seat. Look at this. This says it all. 2019, that extraordinary victory for Boris Johnson, all that blue in those red wall seats. And now, look at this. I mean, it is a sea of red. It's an incredible night for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, a brilliant night for the Lib Dems too. Whatever way you look at it, a terrible night, Sophie, for the Conservatives.
I mean, that map really does just show you, doesn't it, that kind of visual depiction of how the country has changed. Ali, thank you very much indeed, Ali, for Fortescue there on Labour's landslide win. We are keeping our eyes on Downing Street, expecting, of course, to be hearing from Rishi Sunak. That Downing Street statement expected from around 10:30 a.m. And we're also expecting, potentially, to see Jeremy Hunt as well, who is behind that door of number 11. He did manage to hang on to his seat against the odds as well in Godalming too. So a difficult day, of course, a difficult morning for those two men, but of course particularly for Rishi Sunak after leading his party to that historic defeat, the gamble of the early election that did not pay off. Right, let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, shall we, and also Adam Bolton, our election commentator. Adam, the kind of broad brush headlines are very clear, aren't they? This kind of historic landslide win for Keir Starmer, the majority that he's got now, that he can do an awful lot with in Parliament, and the devastating loss for the Conservative Party. But it feels like there's an awful lot of other stories going on as well, kind of under the bonnet, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about personalities. We were hearing there about the cabinet casualties. Let's look at the prominent Conservatives who survived. I mean, Jeremy Hunt, extraordinary personal achievement given the national mood for him to manage to achieve. James Cleverly, also someone who you'd regard as a moderate, and the other cabinet survivors are mostly in that ilk. Laura Trott, John Glenn, Mel Stride. So that, I think, gives you some idea of the direction in which the Conservative Party might want to go. Although, of course, Esther McVey, Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch have all survived as well and may think differently. But also worth thinking about what's happened with Labour, because one of the big differences from 1997 is that there have been casualties on the Labour side, right up to shadow cabinet level. Jonathan Ashworth losing in Leicester, Thangam Debonair losing in Bristol to the Greens, and lower down Khalid Mahmood has been defeated. Now, that shows, I think, that the national mood is going to be very different. We are going to get those vociferous pro-Palestinian campaigners who've actually got into Parliament making their voices heard. And on the other side on the right, we're going to get the voices of Reform, who are now up to 4 MPs, including, of course, you know, the megaphonic capabilities of Nigel Farage. So it's not going to be like 97 for Sir Keir Starmer. Yes, he's got a mandate. Yes, he's got his party behind him. But I think we're going to hear voices off a lot earlier on. I mean, as I was going to watch the exit poll last night, I walked past a pub and there was a young woman there saying, to be honest, I don't really care who wins, provided it's not the Conservatives. And to me, that sums up what's happened this time. And it's not the same as things can only get better, Blair mania.
So I really feel as well, the more I kind of think about it, that the low Labour vote share potentially due to tactical voting driven by that very issue, people's determination to get rid of the Conservative Party. And whoever is the MP most likely to do that, whether it's Lib Dems, whether it's Labour, in some places Green, that's where they're going. Sam, I want to look forward a bit because this is a historic day. You know, we're about to see the transfer of power, the kind of very brutal transfer of power that we see here in our British political system. We're waiting, of course, to hear that speech from Rishi Sunak. And then, of course, it's not going to be him in number 10 at all. It's going to be Keir Starmer. What do you think we're going to see?
Well, within a couple of hours, I think we're going to see Keir Starmer being formally appointed the 58th Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in what has undoubtedly been a peaceful political revolution. Right now, with just 5 of the 650 seats left, Labour are going to have a majority, we think, of about 170, maybe 1 or 2 more than that. That is a political blank cheque for Keir Starmer to do whatever he wants politically. He's got the votes in Parliament to do it. But at the same time, as you were saying, a lot of that enormous success in the Commons due to the collapse of the Tory party, who have been breaking records all morning, records that you wouldn't want to break. The lowest number of seats in the Conservatives' history, the biggest drop in the percentage share of the vote. You can see Rishi Sunak there. I think you can justifiably call him, in electoral terms, the worst Tory leader in history. And this poses all sorts of problems, I think, for where we are, because Labour have ended up coming into power on about 35% of the vote, which is, you know, which barely any increase on last time, lower than Jeremy Corbyn when we saw him in 2017, who was on 40% of the vote. So that is quite something. And there are questions. There are questions about how those independent candidates might affect Labour's foreign policy in office, given their focus on Gaza. There are questions about Northern Ireland, which we haven't talked about. Sinn Féin, now the largest party. The Liberal Democrats riding high. What does that mean for EU relations? In Scotland, worries that, you know, that the SNP recovery does mean what that means for austerity. And is this Labour majority ultimately too widely spread? How much nervousness will there be at the centre about the way that is distributed? I think
also lots of... Isn't it, as we look at Downing Street, we don't know what's going to happen with the Tory party at all as far as Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, this is it. I've just been looking at some numbers. Previously, Michael Howard resigned about 12:30 after Tony Blair gave his Downing Street speech. William Hague, it was 7:46 in the morning. John Major, it was about 11:20 a.m. What is Rishi Sunak going to do? All eyes on Downing Street. I think we can bring in our political correspondent, Maria Aurora, who has been in Downing Street for us this morning. Very rainy-looking Downing Street. It's almost a bit reminiscent of when Rishi Sunak gave that speech where he called the election.
Absolutely, Sophie. It's a massive throwback to the beginning of this campaign. It seems to have kind of bookended the election campaign, doesn't it? Now, we are expecting to hear from the Prime Minister from about 10:30 this morning. He'll be making a statement to the nation. But so far, we have seen him at Conservative Party HQ, presumably apologising as well as greeting his troops after that electoral defeat. So we had those images. I mean, you he wouldn't be responding to journalists shouting questions, but nonetheless, we know now that he's actually behind us. He is in Downing Street, so he went in the back way, so we couldn't get a shot of him this morning walking through that door, but we know he's in number 10 at the moment, and within the next couple of hours will be coming out and giving that all-important statement before travelling to have an audience with the King and officially tendering his resignation. Now, what's also interesting is we're keeping a really close eye on the door from number 11, because we've seen a bit of movement so far this morning, Sophie, as to people coming in and out, a young woman carrying a small suitcase, for instance. So we're just kind of on tenterhooks at the moment, waiting to see if we see the Chancellor, former Chancellor, I should say, Jeremy Hunt, emerge from that door at some point in the next hour or so, perhaps. We don't know. And interestingly, just to go back to the kind of order of things, the timetable this morning. So after Rishi Sunak has officially tendered his resignation to the King, then Keir Starmer will go and have an audience with the King, and the King will ask him to formally form a government. He will then travel down here to Downing Street to obviously move in with his family and start being the next Prime Minister. He will address the nation perhaps this afternoon, and essentially he will have to make sure he kind of has this pitch to the nation that, they have trusted him with their votes, and now he needs to prove his worth and deliver as quickly and as soon as possible. But as I say, we're just trying to see if we might see Jeremy Hunt emerge from that door, so we'll bring that to you if it happens.
Yeah, we'll jump straight back on that number 11 door if it does. Mari, thank you very much indeed. Mari Aurora there from Downing Street. Well, let's get some more reaction now, shall we, with the former Conservative Education Secretary, Justin Greening, and the veteran Labour politician, Dame Margaret Hodge, as well. Justin, to you first. Conservatives in power for over 5,000 days. I think it's the second longest period of uninterrupted government since the Second World War. It feels like now you're about to enter a lengthy period of opposition.
Yeah, these are disastrous results, and they are the end point of 5 years plus of the Conservative Party trying to out-reform, out-Farage, Nigel Farage, and that experiment has utterly failed. And so we end up where we are, where we have stepped out of mainstream politics, left that for Labour, and millions of voters around the country will have felt they had very little choice in the election yesterday. What we now need to do is actually get back into the mainstream, deliver on key promises that did resonate with voters, like levelling up, and frankly, learn from what has been an absolutely appalling, unprecedentedly bad election result.
You sound quite angry. Do you feel angry towards some of your colleagues?
I am angry because I think this has been an obvious political cul-de-sac that we have been travelling down for many, many years at this stage. It was clear, certainly to people like me, that this was where we would end up. We have literally got 120 MPs. Michael Howard had 198, I think I'm right in saying. David Cameron had nearly 3 times as many Conservative MPs. This election result is a disaster, and the party now faces a really simple choice. Do we continue with this failed experiment of trying to out-reform, which will continue to fail, or do we take the long, hard steps to get back into the mainstream of British politics again and to actually stand up for a whole swathe, I think, of British public opinion that did not feel represented at this election?
When you hear, Dame Margaret, when you hear Justin talking in that way about the Conservative Party, how does it make you feel? Are you glad that your old enemy is in this state, or do you actually feel, I guess, a bit concerned that there's no opposition or such a lack of opposition?
Well, of course one wants a decent opposition, because that's how democracy works best. What I was just saying...
Just to jump in, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We are just seeing Jeremy Hunt leaving there. He survived by just 891 votes in his constituency, so that is wafer thin. And if you didn't see much of him during the election campaign, well, that is why he was focused on keeping that seat. Turnout actually pretty high, 76.6% in his seat, which I think really does show the efforts of that man to get the vote out. He's there, of course, with his family, with his wife, with his 3 children, leaving their home in number 11. You can see there the dog as well. Got to get the dog in shot too. I love it. And I mean, Sam, you'd allow Jeremy Hunt a little bit of a victory lap, I guess, after keeping hold of that seat.
He was written off by everyone, but he basically ducked out of the campaign nationally to fight his seat and managed to hang on. And so I think he deserves this moment in the sun, or the rain, as it is, as he and his family get in the car. But we look to what next for this man. Could he be, perhaps, a temporary leader? Or does he want to do something a little less high profile? Does he think his direction, a centrist conservative, a moderate conservative, is the right one for the party? And will he stand up and fight against a backdrop of other moderates like Damien Green losing their seat?
I mean, he's had a crack at the leadership a couple of times before, hasn't he? But as you say, a kind of caretaker role could be something else. Jeremy Hunt and his family there getting into that car, pulling out of Downing Street for the last time. It is a reminder, isn't it, Adam, of the transfer of power that we're seeing today. Such a historic day.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I can't remember ever having seen an outgoing Chancellor do that walk with the family down Downing Street. And I think that underlines that Jeremy Hunt, although he did say during the campaign that there were other things than politics, I think he is going to fight. I mean, he's going to fight for what he believes in, and he can say that he's got a mandate that a lot of others didn't get.
Yeah, that's true. He won where people thought he wouldn't be able to remember doing all of those MRP polls with Sam during the election. He was a goner, according to those projections, but he he survived by just 891 votes. We can bring in our royal correspondent now, Rhiannon Mills, who is live at Buckingham Palace for us, because it's a historic day politically, but also it is a big day constitutionally as well. There are several formalities that have to be observed today. Rhiannon.
I always think it is fascinating that this is one of those rare moments where we see our parliamentary democracy and our constitutional monarchy really working in tandem, because so much of the time is spent trying to separate the monarch from anything political. But this week, literally everything has been organised around this moment when it comes to the King's diary. Usually he would be in Scotland for the entire week, but Scotland Week was condensed down to just a couple of days, partly because all the political elements had to be stripped away, but also most significantly to make sure that he was going to be back here in London for that most important constitutional duty, the handover when it comes to prime ministerial responsibilities. We're still waiting for the King to arrive back here at Buckingham Palace. Yesterday he flew back from Edinburgh to Windsor, so yeah, we wait for the Standard to be flying over Buckingham Palace. He isn't here quite yet. But of course it's also a really important part of the theatre around the day, isn't it? People are used to seeing the cars coming and going, passing all of those big London landmarks that are so famous to people right around the world. But then, in a way, the interesting part of it is then within the peace of the audience room, the really significant moments take place. So first of all, of course, Rishi Sunak will have to come to see the King to tender his resignation. Until he reaches Buckingham Palace, he is still Prime Minister, but he will ultimately offer his resignation to the King will accept it, and then he will move on into a life away from those prime ministerial duties. The next, of course, we will then see Keir Starmer arriving to accept the offer of forming an administration. It has to be said, this isn't going to be the first time that the monarch and Keir Starmer have met. All the way back in 2014, it was then Prince Charles who knighted Sir Keir Starmer. But what this will be is the beginning of a really important relationship for the new Prime Minister. There is, in essence, probably no more important relationship, a lasting relationship. Other cabinet ministers will come and go, Keir Starmer's staff may come and go, but the monarch really is seen as a constant.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. Rhiannon Mills there, live for us at Buckingham Palace this morning as that transfer of power takes place. It's just gone 9:30. Let's remind you again of the big breaking story this morning, because Labour has won the general election and they've won it in dramatic style. Let's show you exactly how it happened. You can see the Labour Party there on 411 seats, a landslide win. They are outperforming even the exit poll now by this time. The Conservative Party, though, down on 119 seats. That is the biggest loss that the Conservative Party have ever experienced. The most seats lost at a single general election, down on 119. A record-breaking night as well for the Lib Dems. In the opposite direction, though, Davey's party are on 71 seats. That is their highest ever total. The SNP are down on 9 seats, really a crumbling for the Scottish National Party, really a victim as well of that Labour resurgence in Scotland. Reform are on 4 seats in total, including Nigel Farage's himself, and the Green Party have picked up 4 seats as well, quadrupling their previous total. Well, the man with the mandate, Sir Keir Starmer, spoke at a Labour celebratory event in London's Tate Modern earlier. He was talking there about the fact that now is time for change to begin.
We did it! You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now. And it feels good, I have to be honest. 4.5 years of work changing the party. This is what it is for. A changed Labour Party, ready to serve our country, ready to restore Britain to the service of working people. And across our country, people will be waking up to the news, relieved that a weight has been lifted, a burden finally removed from the shoulders of this great nation. And now we can look forward again, walk into the morning, the sunlight of hope, pale at first, but getting stronger through the day, shining once again on a country with the opportunity, after 14 years, to get its future back. And I want to thank each and every one of you here for campaigning so hard for change. And not just in this campaign either. Also for these 4.5 years changing our party. The Labour movement is always everything's achieved, past and future, down to the efforts of its people. So thank you truly. You have changed our country. But a mandate like this comes with a great responsibility. Our task is nothing less than renewing the ideas that hold this country together. National renewal. Whoever you are, wherever you started in life, if you work hard, if you play by the rules, this country should give you a fair chance to get on. It should always respect your contribution, and we have to restore that. And alongside that, we have to return politics to public service. Show that politics can be a force for good. Make no mistake, that is the great test of politics in this era. The fight for trust is the battle that defines our age. It is why we've campaigned so hard on demonstrating we are fit for public service. Service is the precondition for hope. respect, the bond that can unite a country. Together, the values of this changed Labour Party are the guiding principle for a new government. Country first, party second. That is the responsibility of this mandate. You know, 14 years ago, we were told that we're all in it together. I say to the British people today, imagine what we can do if that were actually true. So, by all means, enjoy this moment. Nobody can say you haven't waited patiently. Enjoy the feeling of waking up on a morning like this, with the emotion that you do see the country through the same eyes. Hold on to it, because it is what unity is made from. But use it to show to the rest of the country, as we must, that this party has changed, that we will serve them faithfully, govern for every single person in this country. But also, don't forget how we got here. This morning, we can see that the British people have voted to turn the page on 14 years. But don't pretend that there was anything inevitable about that. There's nothing preordained in politics. Election victories don't fall from the sky. They're hard won and hard fought for. And this one could only be won by a changed Labour Party. We have the chance to repair our public services because we changed the party. We have the chance to make work pay because we changed the party. We have the chance to deliver for working people, young people, vulnerable people, the poorest in our society, because we changed the party. Country first, party second isn't a slogan. It's the guiding principle, everything we have done and must keep on doing. On the economy, on national security, on protecting our borders. The British people had to look us in the eye and see that we can serve their interests. And that work doesn't stop now. It never stops. The changes we've made are permanent, irreversible, and we must keep going. We ran as a changed Labour Party, and we will govern as a changed Labour Party. I don't promise you it will be easy. Changing a country is not like flicking a switch. It's hard work, patient work, determined work, and we will have to get moving immediately. But even when the going gets tough, and it will, remember, tonight and always, what this is all about. Now, I may have mentioned my parents a few times in this campaign, once or twice. But the sense of security we had, the comfort they took from believing that Britain would always be better for their children, the hope, not high-minded, not idealistic, but a hope that working-class families like mine could build their lives around. It is a hope that may not burn brightly in Britain at the moment, but we have earned the mandate to relight the fire. That is the purpose of this party and of this government. We said we would end the chaos, and we will. We said we would turn the page, and we have. Today we start the next chapter, begin the work of change, the mission of national renewal and start to rebuild our country. Thank you.
So Keir Starmer speaking a little earlier there. We are expecting, of course, to hear from him later on today in this historic day for the United Kingdom, the transfer of power between the Conservatives after 14 years of government to a resurgent Labour Party. Well, let's get some reaction now, shall we, from the co-chair of the New Conservatives, Danny Krueger, who did manage to hang on to his seat last night, albeit with a reduced majority. What's your reaction to this devastating set of results for your party?
Well, you put it right. It is devastating. I'm so very sorry for my colleagues and all our activists who have lost their seats. This is clearly Labour's moment, and I congratulate them. But the simple fact is they've won because our vote split in two. There's no other explanation for it. There wasn't a great switch to Labour or the Liberal Democrats. It's just that reform and stay at home, and many Conservative voters decided not to vote at all or to vote for reform. And that's our fault. And I accept responsibility, as I hope all my colleagues should and will, for the mistakes that we've made that have caused our vote to fracture in this way.
I'm really interested in your answer there, because I feel like it gets to the heart of the dilemma ahead for the Conservative Party. You say that you've lost because your vote fractured. You effectively lost votes to reform. Others in your party, for example, Jeremy Hunt, Justin Greening, who we've been speaking to this morning, say that it's chasing reform, the culture wars, alienating voters in the South or in some of those other Conservative heartlands that led to this devastating loss. Who's right?
Well, we can both be slightly right, but I'm mostly right. I mean, the fact is, yes, of course, some voters have been alienated by our focus on immigration, for instance, in recent months. But no, fundamentally, we've lost because that focus came too late. We have seen a loss of support for our party because over recent years, we've been seen, rightly, I'm afraid, to have lost control of the most principal obligation of the state, which is to control migration, to control our borders. And I'm afraid it's just simply not the case that people have abandoned us to support Labour or the Liberal Democrats or a more centrist party. They've abandoned us because they don't think we've been doing a very good job. It goes broader than immigration, but it's an essential sort of symbol of the wider failures of the British government. And it's a great shame because many things that we've done in office have been very, very good and positive. And many of the things that are wrong with our country, high taxation, high migration, would have been so much worse if the opposition had had their way in recent years. But fundamentally, we've lost because reform and stay at home, that sort of non-voting party, have picked up the support that we had in 2019.
This debate is going to be played out very soon, I'd imagine, in a leadership contest. And I'm wondering if there's anyone that you'd like to see throw your hat in the ring. Would you rule it out yourself?
Yeah, I don't think anyone would want me to throw my hat in the ring, but no.
That's not quite saying you won't do it, though. You might do it even if no one wants you to do it.
I'm really, that's not a possibility.
Okay.
No, let's see who wants to do it. But can I say, because I understand everyone will want to talk about personalities, but I really think this is an opportunity for us to be very sober and thoughtful about what's just happened. We need a proper post-mortem. I'd like to see quite a long process following Rishi's resignation of choosing a new leader that ensures that we have a really good understanding of what's gone wrong. I think it is possible to have a proper conversation with colleagues from different wings of the party, including many of those who've lost their seats. I think they need to be included in the debate, as well as our members, of course. And I think it is possible, as we did in 2019, to come up with an account of what the country needs that unites both those sort of traditional centrist, the respectable tendency of the Conservative Party with the more radical edge that we've lost to reform. I think we can bring those wings together.
Talking about reform, because it was obviously a good night for Nigel Farage. He's now in Parliament. Do you think there should be a future for Nigel Farage in the Conservative Party if he wants it?
Well, I mean, crucially, he doesn't want it, and he's just stood against us. And I don't think that politicians who try and defeat Conservative candidates have a place in the Conservative Party. What we need is is reform voters. So we need to be very respectful of Nigel Farage and his colleagues. They've just won their seats. All credit to them. I think their articulation of what's wrong with the country often it might be simplistic, but I think it's essentially correct. The British government has failed in some of its key responsibilities, and therefore people have abandoned us. We've got to fix that. So I don't think attacking reform is right, but the fundamental focus needs to be on getting our policy position correct, and then I hope to see those reform voters come back to us.
Okay.
Danny Krueger, it's Sam Coates. Do you think that the next Conservative leader needs to offer a sharply different policy prospectus? Do you think that they need to abandon net zero targets? Do you think they need to pull out of the European Convention of Human Rights?
Well, the sad irony is that in recent months, Rishi's government was moving in that direction itself. They were making some significant amendments to the net zero programme. We were making commitments on the ECHR, our willingness to leave it, significant reductions in the award of visas for legal migration. It was just all too late. I think the policy agenda that the public wants, and that is the right one to oppose Keir Starmer's government, which is going to be all about high taxation and a high migration economy. I think the policy platform is an obvious one. We need to be very clear about it and unafraid, and I do think the focus needs to be on winning those voters who've abandoned us back. But I think we can do it in a grown-up and a sensible way. It doesn't alienate this quite broad coalition, which is, of course, what the Conservative Party is at its best.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Danny Krueger, good to speak to you there. Danny Krueger there, talking about the future of the Conservative Party, what needs to happen next. We can get a bit of reaction now with the former Conservative Education Secretary, Justine Greening, and the Labour politician, Dame Margaret Hodge. Great to have you both with us. I mean, you would disagree with Mr Krueger.
I think the bottom line is, not that many years ago in places like Putney, we were winning 54% of the vote as a party. Last night, we polled just 23%.
That's your former seat, isn't it?
My former seat, but not with a massive presence of reform. So we have absolutely shed many voters to Labour and the Lib Dem. And the underlying issue is actually one of not having delivered on the key promise of levelling up and improving and making access to opportunity fairer for people who are in those parts of the country, just like the one I grew up in South Yorkshire, where it just feels like nothing ever changes, whoever is in government. And so when it comes to migration, that is a symptom of people who have just lost patience with a system that never seems to work for them. So whatever path the party wants to take on migration, until we are getting better on a policy offer, how we're going to develop talent in places like my hometown of Rotherham and make sure it connects up to opportunity much more fairly, and crucially, Sophie, have more people representing the party who aren't from privileged backgrounds, who actually demonstrably have gone through that journey that most of us go through, who start in the state education system, get ourselves to university or an apprenticeship, work through our career, and then maybe think about going into politics. Those are the people who are going to be credible to get the Conservative Party at some point, maybe, back into government.
I mean, the one thing that you do have, I guess, is time to work this out, of course. What the Labour Party don't have is time. Keir Starmer has got to get in there right now and he's got to start enacting things, and he's got a difficult inheritance. He's been pretty cautious so far, hasn't he, Margaret? That kind of Ming vase, carrying it gently over the election line. Do you think we might see a different side of the Labour leader now that he is about to become Prime Minister?
Well, we know he's ruthless and he's determined because he's shown that in the way that he's reformed the Labour Party. But I also think that we've got to reform our politics and we've got to have integrity and honesty in our politics. And he's inherited a very difficult fiscal situation, a very difficult economic situation. I mean, nobody's talked about the cost of living. I think the cost of living had a massive impact on the way people chose how to vote because of the impact it had on them and their families. So he's not going to promise more than he can deliver because I think he does want to bring honesty and integrity back to politics. That's the first thing. But I also do think he's determined. You heard in that speech his determination to equalise opportunities. And I think there's let's wait and see what happens when he opens the books. But also from my knowledge of where we are on the fiscal side, let me give you a couple of examples. For example, the gap between what we should get from taxation and what we do get has grown. It's now £40 billion. Now, if we can really focus on getting the money in from those who are not paying, even 10 billion, that would be a lot.
People promise that at every election, don't they? It was in every party manifesto. It's not easy.
Well, and I think, but no, if I can just say, in the last 10, 14 years, as I've been following it, there has never been any emphasis in our tax authorities to go after those that don't pay the tax. The emphasis has been to get the easy money, those that pay their tax. There's also, we might change the way we spend money. We might not spend all that money on on hotels and bed and breakfast and Rwanda schemes and blah, blah, all that sort of stuff. We won't waste money on PPE contracts that we then burn literally the stuff we got. So there'll be stuff there. And then the final thing I'll say, there are things that we can do. Let me give you just one example. At the moment, if you're a rich oligarch, you will set up a company in the British Virgin Islands. You use that company to buy a property in the UK worth 100 million. You don't pay either stamp duty or capital gains tax if you sell that property. There are things like that, loopholes like that we can close, which will raise the money we need to carry on with the investment.
Thank you very much indeed. We are keeping our eyes on the door of Downing Street, where we're about to see that transfer of power take place later. A very difficult speech that Rishi Sunak will have to be made as he enters the history books for all of the wrong reasons, losing more seats than any other Conservative Party leader at an election before.